Hi, everybody. Welcome to the OFM Podcast, where metabolic health matters. And today's guest is a good friend of mine. We've known each other for what, 5 or 6 or 7 years now?
Something like that. I don't even know. Yeah.
Through Facebook with our friend
Yes.
Mike Julian.
Yeah.
Tina Hein. And I wanted to get Tina on this because she's not what I would call a credentialed expert, but she is an expert. She's an expert in her life. And that's what the message here is today is you need to take ownership that you don't need all these experts opining on the internet. The ultimate source for you is you. And so I'm going to have a lot of people who aren't like credentialed experts, as well as people who are credentialed experts. It doesn't take away that you're a credentialed expert. It's just, it doesn't automatically give someone, that title doesn't give somebody some expertise, and it certainly doesn't give them expertise in the context of your life. And that's really important because we're getting bombarded with all this internet information, and you have all these credentialed experts influencing people, and it's time to start thinking for yourself. And this is what Tina has accomplished. And like I say, you know, when you start to think about it, the fathers and mothers of science, a lot of them weren't credentialed experts. They did it. People who built bridges and things like that. Back in the day, a lot of these things were done without credentials and courses. People just learned, they problem solved. And today, in the context of your life and really kind of getting your life to in sync with yourself, that's kind of where it is. There is no credentials. You can have all these people, lifestyle coach, blah, 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 blah. But at the end of the day, it's all about you. And so the title of this podcast today is Creating a Sanctuary with Tina Hein, because we're going to talk about that with Tina, because she and her husband, Jeff, have really accomplished that. And to a point, you just got in from milking goats, right?
Yes, right. Yeah. Yeah.
So welcome, Tina. And let's just dive into all about you and creating a sanctuary.
Sounds great. It's been quite the journey. You know, I like to think that I'd like to hope that my whole life has been absolutely wonderful. But the more I explore and the more I find things that bring me profound joy, the more I realize, it just keeps getting better and better and better. So I love where this is at, because you and I have had so many conversations about bringing our stress levels down and taking care of us. And the more and more I dive into this work, the more I realize how important that is. And I might not be a credentialed expert, but boy, have I listened to a lot of them, including you, Peter. So it's really wonderful that we have this ability to speak and communicate, because the more I learn from other people who share their stories, the more I come into myself still.
Yeah, and you've really done your work, and like you say, life is good right now because you've created that sanctuary, but it wasn't always that way, right?
That's right. Yeah.
You know, we don't need to do a super deep dive, but kind of share your story and background from like your childhood, you know, through where you've been in the last 5 to 7 years, because I think, you know, I'll take a little bit of credit because that fat adaptation is part of that, what I call that upward cascade. You know, when you get your physiology right, and then you're more emotionally stable. And as you do your work and confront your demons, everything just kind of works in that upward flow.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. Well, you know, I was actually just listening to a podcast the other day, a soft white underbelly podcast, and it was listening to this woman, and she was talking about how, you know, she had a little rough in her childhood, a lot rougher than I ever had it, of course. And what really resonated for me in that podcast was she just kept picking the same things again, and she kept having the same experiences, and until she dealt with them, she kept having these same negative experiences, and I think that was true for me too. It was really fascinating for me, because it seemed like every little wonderful thing I picked also had something I had to work on. But I definitely enjoyed spending a lot of time in my childhood running around and playing, but it wasn't until I moved away and was working really hard and just kept picking these things that just seemed to kind of bite me in the butt, like working really hard, moving across the country with my husband when I was 18 and then working almost full time while being in university full time to just try and get things done. I just had this need to work really hard, or belief that I had to work really hard. But at the same time, all of the things that I did helped to create the sanctuary that I have today. So it's really fascinating, but it is important for me to explore and check things out and look at the reason that I choose things that I choose to do. Most importantly now, it's choosing to have peace and choosing to have a home that I love and to feed myself, to feed our family on our own property, and to extricate ourselves from this big system that we're in. But also more importantly, like I've been with my husband for a really long time, since I was a very young person. And a few years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, actually not too far around the time I met you, we realized that we wanted to reinvest in ourselves. We weren't living our best lives. And so we started to explore. But the most important part of that exploration was actually diving into myself and realizing that I actually wasn't really living in my body, and I wasn't doing the things that I actually wanted. I had this belief system that all the things that I was doing that were causing me to work too hard, or all those things, were actually really destroying my nervous system, and maybe is the reason that I went into very, very early menopause. And so since then, I've been really trying to bring all the stress, bring all the cortisol out of my body. Like listening to you has helped me to recognize how very important that is. But realizing that I was operating at a high level of stress all the time, and that I seemed to really like that. My nervous system seemed to crave it, and recognizing that maybe there was something I needed to work on there. So just digging up all the things that were causing me to subconsciously choose things that were causing me more frustration and pain, so that I could then be able to say, oh, wait, I actually don't need to engage in that argument. It means nothing. Or I really do just want to be home, or I want to be cared for by my husband. I want, rather than
or you want to care for your husband.
Or both of those things are true.
Right. We'll
exactly.
talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But realizing that, a lot of my beliefs have come from outside of me, and starting to listen to what I really wanted, and as opposed to listening to everything I learned in programming and the sitcoms and movies that give you this false idea of what reality is in a relationship, was really important for me to recognize.
Well, there's now with the internet, there's even all this messaging bombarding us now. Let's kind of dive into that, because this is something that, we all have to deal with. And I think for the listeners, this may or may not be germane, but, I've worked with some pretty stellar people throughout my life. And one of the things that was brought to my attention several years ago was this concept of childhood wounding, and
Mm-hmm.
how we get wounded, whether it's through real trauma or perceived trauma or emotional trauma. And if it's not addressed and dealt with in a proper way, which is what parents are supposed to do, they often don't, because they're still manifesting their childhood wounding in adult life. We set these patterns of behavior up that they might be different on the surface, but it's playing out that same messaging, and we get accustomed to that, where we don't really know any different. And so we just go through life recreating different like on the surface scenarios as we transition through life, and still getting that same message that I don't know. I remember the Wayne's World, we are not worthy message. That's a guy's way, but I mean, for a woman, it's even more complex, right? I mean,
it's fundamental. Yeah. For women, for women especially, I feel I'm sure it's absolutely the truth for men as well. For all of us, really. Like, the reality is, if we are not feeling connected to ourselves and our tribe, then we may not feel worthy. And And it's very, very important for us because we're such a social herd animal. We need to be a part of that. We need to be worthy in order to feel safe. And so with all this messaging that comes from other places, even makeup ads and all of those things that constantly tell us that our body isn't good enough, or what we do isn't enough, if we're not working 80 hours a week and have 3 children and have lots of sex with our husbands and be happy and smiling about that, then we're a failure as a woman. So that's or a man, and so it really, it's an important thing to start to recognize, like, what is the root of these decisions that we make. I remember listening to someone speak about free will, and do we really have free will? Based on all of our life experiences, we make decisions based on all of those experiences. So I think that as we start to recognize what our wounding is, like you said, then we can make more informed and better decisions for us.
Yeah, and the thing is, because of this wounding, and I see this play out with people, especially with in the endurance market. I mean, one of my close friends, we talked a lot about this because of our own childhood stuff was very similar because of our cultural backgrounds. And like in endurance, we see this bifurcation. It's a spectrum, but there's this clear bifurcation of, you have people in ultra endurance who are truly successful in every vein of their life. And so their endurance is just an extension of who they are. And then you have these people who, like, their whole life is wrapped up in, like, I'm an ultra runner, or I am an Ironman, or I ride centuries. And it's like, what are you running from?
Yeah.
And so that's the thing. So in conjunction with this concept of childhood wounding and how we, continue that pattern at its core, just in different outward manifestations through life, there was also this learning, it's part of that dance we do around the wounding to avoid dealing with it. Right.
Yeah. I was definitely
part of that. So share with us that, and then how, you had your come to Jesus meeting, so to speak.
Well, it was actually really humbling when I really realized that, because I found you through endurance running, and recognizing that I wasn't running as effectively as I could, especially when this beautiful little fairy of a woman passed me like she was floating through the air, and I was just trying to get through this 50. And I realized, I started to dive into myself, and it was really humbling when I realized that I was actually running away from myself this entire time. And then I had to look at a lot of things, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure what it is that you're looking for me from me for right now, Peter. What is? Can you ask me again?
Just
Okay.
I think it's part of this whole.
Yeah.
It's the ability that you had to exactly deal with that. Come to it. I see you're getting emotional, which is healthy, right? Because it's powerful, and how we can channel that power of that wounding into a more positive life, which I feel you've really done, and give people the inspiration that they can do it themselves. Because I've had some interactions recently where I've seen this, and it's like, I wish there was some way I could get that across to the person, that you are worthy of a healthy relationship. You are worthy of doing this, but you still have to take responsibility and confront that demon rather than run from it. So
it's really the most powerful thing, Peter, to take control and to look at yourself, because it took me a really long time, because I was trying to control the world around me, and I was trying to say, in an effort to not look at my issues. But once I started to realize, oh shit, I can actually really, like, if I look at this and I realize that if I just pause for a minute before I say something that might cause a fight, or if I just realize that I'm not trying to change someone else, I have an unmet need, and how can I meet that need myself instead of expecting it from other people? And figuring out what those needs were was really the crucial part. it was really the thing that I needed to recognize, is that when you feel, I believe, when you feel like you're not worthy, then you don't ask for things, because if somebody says no, then it can be extremely devastating. And that is a strategy that I know I certainly used, and I know I'm not alone in that. And so once I started to, once I started to realize that that I could meet my own needs, but also that my husband, for instance, wanted to meet my needs. So if I just asked for what I wanted from him, then he would fall over backwards and forwards and in every way to meet that need. Because and to me, this was the biggest lie ever told, is that yes, we need to meet our own needs, but also meeting each other's needs is part of fulfilling ourselves and fulfilling each other. And so when I started to realize polarity, and that we had in our relationship, we had a reversed polarity, that I had believed that I was supposed to be the ball buster and that he should be intuitive and just know everything about me, and he should be able to read me, and that's absolute absurdity.
Thank you, Tina.
Just not how you guys work or how we work either.
No. Like I say, there's a reason why in most mammal species the males go off on their bachelor herds after the mating season.
Yes. Yeah. But, once I probably one of the most people like Kim Anami, Kelly Brogan, all kinds of people were really important to me. I was in the Red Sisterhood for a while as well, which I found really helpful. But probably one of the simplest little things that I learned in my life that helped to change how I felt in my relationship was reading a little book called The Queen's Code. And it just showed me how the way that I spoke to my husband actually really emasculated him. And it gave him, it took away his purpose. If he came in, for instance, it's just a simple, fun little example. Like if he came into the kitchen and I was jumping up on the counter because I'm 5'0" to try and get something in a top cupboard, and he would say, "Can I get that for you?" And if I just said, "No, I can get it myself," that little act, it cuts his balls off, and it takes away his purpose. He's 5'9" or 5'10", and he can reach the shelf, and he can absolutely get that for me. And when he does, and I just look him in the eyes and say thank you, and I'm not stressing myself out trying to get the goddamn jar, then things work a little bit more smoothly. But it takes a lot of reprogramming to realize that is something that can actually supercharge your life, is if you just lean into when I started to lean into what his strengths were and to ask him to take care of me, and he would do the same, and I would take care of him with joy, get to a point where he's done all kinds of things throughout the day that when he gets home, I'll just say, "What can I get for you for dinner?" Those little things make both of us happy, and recognizing
what a concept.
What a concept.
What a concept. Yeah. And unfortunately, this is not the narrative, for lack of a better term. And then I'm sure it probably I'll have you talk about your end of it as a woman, but I'm sure it also triggered passive aggressive behavior in Jeff.
Oh, it was, I can't speak to that for certain, but we definitely were at each other, and we were not meeting each other's needs, and we were trying to feel our needs from each other passive aggressively both ways, I'm sure. Absolutely. Yeah. And I'd rather not remember that. But
no, but it's important to recognize it, because there is so much passive aggressive behavior, and a lot of it is just unintentional.
It is. And it's learned. It's a learned behavior. Yeah. And we learn it from everywhere. And like I said, like I alluded to earlier, we see it on the sitcoms, we see it in our movies, we see it everywhere. We even read about it in books a lot of the time. And it's programmed us to behave this way. And the profundity of recognizing that, holy cow, everything that I've learned in the world is working against my physiology. And therefore, is that the reason that I had an extremely early menopause, and everything in my life changed. That was a really profound experience for me, to realize that nearly everything that I had learned was maybe not as it seemed. And so it's been a powerful relearning and remembering of what it is that I want and need. Yeah.
And so that creation of the sanctuary starts within.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Coming into myself and recognizing what my wants were. I had shut myself down so effectively, I didn't even know what I wanted. And sometimes when I actually opened up.
Let me just stop you there.
Mhm.
Hold that thought, because
Yeah.
once you get to that point, you're very susceptible to messaging.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Yeah. And hopefully I found the messaging, I believe I found the messaging that I was open to that is actually good for me and my nervous system and my body and my family. And I feel like it is. And the more that I speak to you, the more that I learn from other mentors, the more that I spend time meditating and listening to myself, the more I think that this is the right path. So I hope that more and more people start to actually listen to what their belly is telling them. I've spent so much time with my belly in the last little while. I don't know about most ladies, but I recognize that I have been trying to tune out of that belly for a really long time, and learning to breathe into it, to walk with it and use it as a tool has been really, really interesting. But it's almost like I'm having to relearn this part of my body, but it's the part that I need to listen to the most.
Absolutely. And then I'll give a couple of pointers there. One is what I've been talking about lately is that, modern technology and science is there to help us actually be better,
Mhm.
but it's taken away, unfortunately, the actual outcome has been, it's taken away our own intuitive sense of ourselves. It should actually support it. And that's why I'm all for the science. I'm for the data. I'm for the new technologies, but they're there to corroborate the experience, not drive it. And
Well said.
when our metabolism and physiology are working well, when our biomechanics are working the way they should, our natural intuition, our experience is that most powerful tool. And then it should be corroborated by the data, whether you're wearing a glucose monitor or a heart rate
Mhm.
monitor, or blood work says this, or your pace and time if you're wearing a Garmin. That should all
Mhm.
corroborate the experience and not drive it. But unfortunately, what's happened now is because of modern marketing and our fascination with things, whatever the latest trend is, like glucose monitors
Mhm.
and tracking your glucose is a big deal. We all of a sudden hyper focus on that, and it's like, no, you can learn to know when your blood sugar's high and when it's low, and the data will corroborate that,
Yeah,
right?
my scientific instrument is my body now. I have used tools, but now I look at my skin, I look
Yep.
at how I'm feeling, and I try not to look at the scale, but I have used that as a tool. Like if I eat something and then I get on the scale the next morning and suddenly I'm 5 pounds heavier, I know that food that I ate the day before did not agree with my system. And so
No.
maybe I need to pay attention and not eat that again, or who knows. But you're right, like using pieces of equipment, following other people who've done extraordinary science is how I've come to this place. Like I came from a place of, after my son was born, my whole body just quit. I had gigantic allergic reactions all over my body. My body had said no, and I've really been on a reconnection with myself since that point. And that was, he's turning 16 this year, so it's taken a while. It's taken finding people like you to and others as well to be able to figure this out. Like I know I found you through keto, and like I had explored keto, but it wasn't quite right for me. And so finding OFM really kind of tuned me in a little bit more, helped me settle in, and especially the work that you and I have talked about bringing your stress down. Bringing my stress down was so crucial. I just really didn't have any idea how stressed out I really was. I remember people would say, well, what's your stress level? I'm not stressed out. But now as I look
you
back,
just adapted to the stress.
just adapted. Exactly.
Right.
We're amazing at adapting to things.
Yes.
And that's fantastic. Look at this creature we are. But the more I shed stress, the better my life has become, and as well as tuning into myself as well. So that's been a really important part of my life for sure.
Yeah, and just coming back to being into your belly and your core, I think as a woman that's very important for reasons I know I don't know. That's how I'll phrase it.
Yeah. Fair.
Because there's a certain biological grounding that women have that men don't have, and that is the whole reproductive cycle of wanting to have a child, gestating and carrying a child to term, birthing, and then lactating. It's just it's a very, that's what keeps the species going. That's what keeps the species going, is that thing. And it's the females that are driving it. Men need a purpose, because without that, we're a mess.
We need you too.
Well, right? I get that, but
yeah,
we don't have that grounding. So it's a different challenge, but you guys have that grounding. But one of the things I wanted to also point out about, apart from the intuition, trusting your own feeling once you have your physiology working right, is an Alexander technique thing about when your biomechanics are right, you relax your diaphragm to breathe in, and then the air just comes right in. And when you're stressed, you can't relax that diaphragm, so you're using all this musculature with counter, you got one muscle working against another, one tension, counter tension, and when you're breathing properly and when you're not breathing properly.
Peter, that has been probably one of the most powerful experiences of my life, and then to have you corroborate what my experience was really extraordinary, because you introduced me to Alexander technique, but it was through another person, Irene Lyon, that I discovered Feldenkrais, whom you said is
he was a student of FM Alexander's, and both of them had really strong personalities, so it didn't work well.
Yeah. Well, it was when I finally went, I have tried, like I said, I've been trying to bring my physiology into a healthy space for 16 years, really. And it wasn't until I went and had a session with a Feldenkrais practitioner that I realized I have never walked effectively in my life. And since then, I have been trying to adjust my whole frame, because every little trauma, every little stress that I've had in my life, I have stored it in my tissues.
Yeah.
I'm holding it.
Yep.
That's right. And my entire body was crooked. And everything was crooked. And so when I mentioned earlier about how this lovely little beautiful fairy ran by me, this beautiful young woman ran by me, with beautiful grace and ease. And I just said, how do I do that? That's when I really started to dive in. I had mostly gotten the diet under control and learned about a little bit about stress and so on. A little bit, but not enough. But then I started to realize, okay, what is happening with my frame, and every little issue that I've had throughout my life. And, some of the early days weren't so great. There were some things there, but I continued throughout my life to add more and more and more pressure to my body. And what you were talking about earlier about the belly and about the diaphragm, and that first time that I went for a walk, and I actually moved my body in the way that I learned was possible. And my belly expanded and breathing became effortless. And it felt like my body could move forever in that way. It was like the first time I was like, wow, this is pretty amazing. The second time I was like, oh, this is cool, I'm doing it. The third time I was like, it felt like this is what life is supposed to be like. It's supposed to be easy and graceful like this. And it's still a practice, because everything around us right now is creating a little bit more stress, or at least I choose to look at it that way anyway. And so the habit, I'm trying to break those habits I'm trying to adjust those habits of how I move and how I hold my body. And right now I'm doing something called network spinal chiropractic. And it is really, really helping me to shift my frame and to loosen, as well as a really powerful meditative practice that I'm doing. And really noticed that in the first really good run that I did in a couple of years now with my son the other day, that I was actually able to stretch my leg all the way back in a way that I didn't know was possible before. I was able to move my glutes and my legs in ways that I didn't think were possible. And I had a glimmer of how that lovely, beautiful young woman was running through the forest, so graceful. And like, now I can see it, and now it's possible.
One of the things when you're running is a dynamic balance, but it's no different than standing, walking, or running, because when you're standing, you're having your center. We have an arch on our foot for a reason. And we're supposed to have our center of gravity over that arch. So when you're standing, it's not a static thing. It's a dynamic thing. So when you're over your arch, that'll feel weird because you're letting go. You're relaxing those muscles. and balancing those muscles. Most people are sitting back on their heels.
You know, what's please go ahead.
Yeah, that creates tension, counter tension. But when you're over your arch, you're distributing the load across your footbed because that's what an arch is for. But then that sets up the proper distribution of weight across the surface area of all the joints, the ankles, the knees, the hips, and right up the spinal column to the back of the head. So the point I wanted to make for you and divert is when you're running, you'll get to the point where that microsecond where your foot comes underneath you on the foot strike, each foot, you'll feel this tap where that grounding occurs right under your center of gravity. It'll go right up to the base of your spine, right to the base of your head. And you'll just feel that. And that's when you're going to be in this dynamic balance. You want to go faster, you just lean from the ankles a little farther forward. If you want to go slower, you lean from the ankles a little bit back. And you can play with that.
Yeah. And
it's the same with standing. Okay. You just go back and forth from your ankles, and that's how you do it. But you'll feel that micro thing of it's like you're driving a little stake right up to the base of your skull, and it's like you're in proper alignment. So, and then that allows your hip to rotate forward, get into that balance to where when you're breathing, whether you're running, standing, lying down, your diaphragm is relaxing down. The air just comes in on its own. You're supremely efficient. You got that occipital movement of your arms, where you've got the right leg going forward, the left arm going forward, and everything works in that flow state. So
pardon me, I want to mention the arch in our back as well, because for myself, I just had this belief that I was supposed to suck in my gut and suck in my gut and be straight. And it was actually the relaxing of my belly into my pelvic bowl and not holding it up. That was really crucial for me.
Yes, it's that bringing that pelvis down, because when we have tension, it's in the small of our back, and it tilts that pelvis up, and that's what creates tight hamstrings, all those things. And just for the audience, this is all germane to creating this sanctuary, because the more you can relax into yourself and the more you're aware, it just seems to create, once again, that cascade where other things in your life just start to flow.
Well, I think that it was also crucial for me to also learn to love my belly. I think this is a big thing for a lot of women. I think no matter what size you are, we hate our bellies. We all do. And so it was just realizing that I have been strangling myself my whole life by trying to hold my belly in and trying to be this idea of beautiful that I believed was the goal. And once I relaxed, once I allowed my belly to sit in my pelvic bowl as it's meant to, then I almost did like a palm to my forehead kind of moment. And speaking to you about that, you're like, oh, I hate it when I hear people say like hold in your core or strengthen your core, those kind of things. And that was the first time I've ever heard that. I've never heard anyone say that.
Lock your core. Lock your core.
Yeah. I locked everything down. Everything was locked down. Yeah.
Yeah. And that, again, that creates that downward spiral. Like people have this image, they got to have a 6-pack ab. If you're a guy, woman, you're supposed to have a toned, tight belly, no stretch marks, and that creates tension.
Yeah, a lot of it.
Part of that downward cascade, and then you're not breathing well, which is going to restrict oxygen flow in, CO2 out.
And my digestion was terrible. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, right. I was strangling my entire intestinal tract by trying to hold it in. Not only am I not breathing, but I'm also not digesting and not absorbing nutrients effectively, and also not excreting any waste products effectively either. So it was really powerful realization.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I'm thinking now about the whole counterculture thing, which created a lot of this undoing, but not really. But I'm thinking a positive thing because back then when this was all happening, and I was a precocious young boy, but I was precocious enough to see it and witness it. It was like you had all the counterculturists saying, "Don't be uptight."
Yeah,
and it's like the perfect term is being uptight, and it's actually I mean, it's so pervasive now because of modern technology is now causing this fight or flight response on a chronic subconscious level daily. I mean, just the pinging of your phone saying you got a text message or a message or a call just sets that up.
Yeah. Yeah. I met an interesting in my experiences in the last decade or so, I met a healer, and her motto, it always makes me laugh, but every time I try and remember it, and her motto is relax your asshole. And it's true. You need to relax your entire body. And we're wound tight. And so I even notice it in like all around us. We are walking and holding our hips together and trying to keep everything in, and I mean, nothing's flowing that way. And the more I meditate and the more I loosen my body, and the more energy flows out of it, and then creativity bubbles up when that happens, the more I realize, boy, this is a really wonderful experience. This is a really wonderful way to live. And I'm glad I found it. And I spent a long time doing the opposite. And, there was a part of me that would try and tell me, like, how could I be so silly, or how could I be so ridiculous for doing that for so long? But it really, for me, I take that as that showed me what I don't want. And now I'm just so grateful to be able to have health, and have joy and wonderment, and enjoy clouds, and enjoy my goats and rabbits and humans that are in my life, and in a way that I wasn't able to.
You have curiosity and wonder, and you're open to different perspectives. You don't have to adopt them, but hey, if that's what you want to do, you can do it, and accepting of people for where they are. And so this is really, to kind of frame this as we move along, it starts with that core inner work, right? The childhood wounding, the psychological trauma that we have to where we're it's sort of like a setup, because we're, when we are children, when we're infants, we are helpless. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, we're influenced by our parents and people close to us in that circle, that if that wounding happens, we continue to feel helpless. We also continually depend on others, which makes us more susceptible to control rather than others helping us to claim our sovereignty, but at the same time allowing other people to have their sovereignty too. But with that healthy, like you say, that healthy codependence, whether it's a husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, co-workers, collaborators, friends, wherever that meaning of the human connection. Like you say, we're social creatures, but also because we're human and we've got this human thought process, our ability to be individuals is also important, but it can go off the rails as much as the herd mentality can go off the rails. Yeah.
And I know in this day and age, of course, we hear a lot about femininity and masculinity. And I think that...
I don't know about that. I think we're hearing a lot about gray area right now. Don't get me started on that.
But I do believe that I've been led to believe that we are separate, and I don't think we are. We're not meant to be separate from each other. We're meant to feed off each other and care for each other, whether that's a parent for a child or friends for each other, or males and females, or females and females, who knows? I think we're supposed to feed off each other and care for each other. And I believe it's supposed to be like an infinity loop. And the more you feed one person, then they, in theory, can then take care of you, or maybe somebody else is feeding you, but you can feed someone else. And I think
that upward cascade effect, rather than this control and dominion over other people.
Yeah.
And that's part of creating that sanctuary.
Yes. And that you can actually get some incredible joy from caring for someone else. Like the act of caring for someone else can also feed you. So there's so much messaging that I've been trying to adjust and and recognizing like I don't want to be a doormat, and I don't want to just serve other people. I need to learn how to receive as well as to be able to give, and no matter who that is too, whether it's a conversation between you and I where we go on for 3 hours and talk about 50 million subjects, or friends or people in the downtown area that we live that need a little bit of extra support in our downtown, whatever it is, it's a gift to give and it's a gift to receive. And
well, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on here was also to talk about something I've come to think, and I've shared it with a couple of female clients who are very successful, in this modern vein of having careers, really big careers, and be all, do all, and that is that, I found that the modern woman with the modern messaging, I've come to this conclusion, and coming from me as a misogynistic Neanderthal male, it's coming from me as a biologist looking at this from a evolutionary biology thing. It's like women right now, a lot of women, because of the messaging, they're in a fundamental conflict with themselves, with their biology, because a woman's biology, like I said earlier, is grounded in caring, nurturing, giving life, nurturing life. That's their fundamental drive. And you don't have to have children to do that. I see a lot of women who choose not to have children, but there's still that mothering, nurturing tendency is there. It's just biological hardwiring in a female. And with this messaging of having to have a career and all that, and then of course on top of the career you have to have the children and raise the children real well. You tend to be a helicopter parent, and then you want to be an athlete in some, whether it's CrossFit or Ironman or marathon running. And when when you just want to be a woman,
yes,
and you want to care for your children, you want to have your husband be that, not the breadwinner, but the hunter who gives you that security that you and your children are going to be fed and nurtured in that way. And in turn, you're going to create the home life and nurture at home. So a lot of women are in this fundamental conflict. And when I've shared this with women, and they're like, it's like an aha moment for them.
It really is, Peter. That was a huge aha moment for me. And you only have to look to women's literature and romance novels and things like that to see what really drives women like deeply. And when I realized that I really I love to raise a human. Like, it's been the most profound moment of my life, and I don't fault people for not wanting to choose that. But when I really lean into, like, this is why we get along so well, we're both biologists, when I really lean into the behavior of it and recognizing how important my role is, but also how important his role is. I can't raise an extraordinary human by myself. I need to be the nurturer. I want to be the nurturer. I want to feed him. My son, he can feed himself these days, of course, but I want to feed him and nurture him. And then I want and need, and he needs my husband to be there, to be the one to push him, to be the one to help him to take risks, because I don't want to see my son take any risks. Literally all my eggs are in one basket, right? Exactly. And it's a bit conflictive, but you get it. Yeah. Because the last thing I have this, personally, I have this challenge with the mother of my children is it's they want to protect them, and we live in a society, we've so ensconced ourselves in this man-made construct that we want risk-free, challenge-free lifestyles, and you need that male to come in and say, no, you get your ass out of bed, you're going to go do this, or the other thing, and you're like, no, that's my baby. That's right. And I still do that. And I still have to fight myself. And, to be perfectly honest, that's a cause of conflict between my husband and myself, because he's pushing him and I'm seeing him push him. And I see my son being a little frustrated and I want to go in and save him. So I have to consciously take myself out of that situation. And to me, it is hard to do, but it's the most important thing I can do for my kid, is to pull myself out of their relationship and let them work it out, and to probably the thing that has formed our family the most was hearing from a mentor. I think it was Dr. Laura. And she said to me that children thrive on the differences between their mothers and fathers. And when I was watching my husband like fling my kid up in the air when he was little, I would have to like turn the other way and leave the room. But it created this extraordinary human who when he meets other people, they're amazed by him. And I'd like to say it's all me, but it's not. It's the combination of his mother and his father that's crucial. And like, I believe this fundamentally now in this exploration that my husband and I together are superhuman. When we're united together, things come to us. It's a beautiful thing. Our son is in the best place. Like our business is the most successful when we are united and when we are really serving each other beautifully. We, like, everyone around us notices it. And I believe that this has been this really insidious messaging that has really truly harmed people, particularly children. This messaging that men and women are enemies of each other is the most detrimental subconscious belief that I had in my life. And I don't know if other people had that belief, but by what I see around me, I feel like that's the case. I feel like we believe that we're the enemy of each other and that we are supposed to fight each other. And as I have recognized that his strengths support my strengths and together we're even more powerful, that has been the most fundamental shift in my life and created sanctuary and reduced my stress levels. To be perfectly frank, though, I still fight that old programming, and sometimes a little wound comes up and I'll get a little cranky, or he might get a little cranky, and we have to consciously look at that and come back to it and realize
just walk
we're in this
away
together.
for a while.
That's right. Yeah.
But, and so for the audience to know, I want to remind them, this didn't come easily. You guys were literally at each other's throats at certain times in your marriage.
For sure.
And, so people need to know that, they can say, oh, this person has this and all that, but it's like, no, it's not easy, but we do have the sovereignty, and this messaging is exactly that. This divisiveness is meant to tear apart these core family units or these core relationships of friends, right? The distraction. Yes. Like I've really come to this conclusion of like, I don't want to be somebody who is looking over their shoulder. What does this person want from me? Blah, blah, blah. I choose not to live, so relationships matter to me. But I'm also like street smart enough to understand that, okay, there's this, what I call the human condition. And so I have to be aware of that and have healthy boundaries when those cues present themselves. Like the old Ronald Reagan saying was, trust but verify. I'd rather approach it that way than to be mistrusting of everybody.
Yeah.
And so, but the point I wanted to make here is that the way things are set up today in this man-made construct, whether it's by intention or not unintentional, it is tearing up that core thing, like the individual's own sense of self. Because like for you guys to have this relationship, it has to start with you getting some level of self-confidence about where you are, because when you're confident about where you are, you're also open to other people's opinions. You're open to even being wrong.
Yes,
and readjusting.
Exactly.
Right. And that takes a lot. And when you don't have that confidence, you're in a fear-based modality. So that's going to create cortisol. It's going to create fear. And then it locks you into what I call being right in your own mind and not open to alternatives. Yes,
exactly. And like I operated on fear. So like my entire life was living in a fear state. And is that the reason my physiology shifted and I ended up in early menopause? Did I overdose on cortisol in an effort to try and keep up with masculinity and men and to prove how valuable I was? Maybe.
Bust some balls.
What's that?
Bust some balls.
Bust some balls, yeah, or just prove that
I'll
I can
have
do it
to
myself.
ask Jeff about that.
Yeah. I don't know if I busted his balls like with a sledgehammer, but it was subtle. And that's how women are. I don't want to speak for all women, but that's how I was. And that's how I see many people is we're physically different from men, but that doesn't mean we're less powerful. And the way that we communicate with our partners, particularly men, can really harm them. And you know, it's something that we have to really take seriously and take responsibility for, because when I realized that if I just shifted the way that I both perceived and what my husband was doing and the way that I communicated with him, everything changed. And that was something I could do. Like I said to you earlier, I was trying to change everyone around me. But once I realized, oh, wait, I'm kind of being a jerk here. Or if I just ask him, like, you know, better when you get more bees with honey, if I would just say, you know, would you be willing to get this for me instead of, will you do this for me later? Like, those are different energies, and they really affect other people's bodies. And I have been, this is the humbling part, is I've been saying to him for years, you know, your tone, it's all about your tone and how you speak to me. And of course, when we look in the mirror,
you're projecting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you look in that mirror and you're like, oh, humble pie is not so good tasting.
But that's the thing. When you can eat humble pie, when you can look at that wounding, it's like transformational.
That's right. And that's where I take the opportunity to say to him, you know what, you know, I'm really grateful we're still here and we're still together. And I'm sorry that I didn't recognize that the way that I was communicating with you was not helpful, and we can do better together. I think something else that's missing, that was missing for me, and I'm grateful for Dr. Laura for pointing this out to me, is that we sometimes forget, like after a period of time with a person, we start to forget the reasons we picked the person. We start to forget all the great things about them. And we made a concerted effort to take a hold of one of Kim and Ami's practices, which is sending each other little messages. I love you because, and just as a little reminder, like, I love you because you work so hard for me. I love you because you come home with a smile on your face. I love you because, like, if we just take that moment to consciously make an effort to love that person that we're with, that we picked and love and are great, then that shifts our relationship as well, instead of falling into that easy pattern of, oh, I hate when he speaks to me like that, or, oh, I wish he would just do this, or why can't he just take the garbage out?
It's really all about reminding yourself.
It is.
When you remind, because, you know, like a guy, from a guy's perspective, I totally get, because I've stood back and watched it. Women need that kind of reinforcement.
We need to hear it.
It's part of that thing where a guy is like, if a guy's really being in his guyness, it's just, this is it. I've got to go out and conquer, and I got to bring home the you know, and provide and do this. And it's like, we don't need it verbally as much as we just don't need to be attacked. We already know that's true.
But also, I want to counter that with, like, if you came home from a day of killer activity and slaying dragons and things like that, and you walked in the door and your partner looked at you in the eye and said, boy, I'm glad to see you today, and thank you for working so hard for me, I think that would go a long way to easing a lot of tension in life and relationships.
Yeah, it would, but just those subtle subconscious cues of having dinner ready, saying, honey, I got the kids, you've had a hard day. Just doing it without saying it is we don't need much. What gets us, and this is the frustration of men, where we act out in really bad ways, is when we feel attacked from within, like from that female. And I don't, it doesn't excuse our behavior, because it can be really bad, but it needs to be understood that, you know, you're out there slaying dragons and all of a sudden you're getting clawed in the back from your wife.
That's right.
And all of a sudden you're just reacting. And it's the same thing with the female. She's just reacting. And it's like, we have this human capacity to step back and assess things and change our course rather than react.
Yeah. Yeah. And just appreciation for each other, I think,
That's
is
right.
something that is a simple thing. If you can just find a way to share your appreciation, or just take a moment and be grounded and look your partner in the eye and say thank you, or give them the hug, or find out whatever it is that they love. I'm not a hugger. He loves touch and he loves hug, but I'm not a hugger. I like it when he does things for me, and he likes to be touched. So when he realizes, oh, she's been looking for something to be fixed for a while, I'll just do this. And then I give him a big hug as a result of him doing that thing for me. That's that example of how we feed each other. If you can figure out what it is that really motivates your partner and just start to feed them that way, it's a powerful experience.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. And so part of this creating the sanctuary, let's talk about now the window dressing. And I do have a part of this I want to bring in that's more substantive, but you live on Nanaimo Island, is that correct?
Vancouver Island,
Vancouver Island, in the city of Nanaimo. So compared to most people out there, you're living in a small community.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Well, there's about 100,000 people here, but we live fairly rurally, and it's a pretty small little community where we are right now.
And you have, in what you guys have created, is you have a little bit of property. You built a house from annex, and now you have a little farm with goats, and you've probably turned your need to nurture as a woman to your goats, right? I see these goats.
That's it. Yeah, that's it.
I don't think Hunter's going to go for all the nurturing at 16.
It's it. And that's exactly. And taking care of those animals feeds me, and literally feeds me. So what we've created here, when people come to our home, we bought this beautiful home that was built for a year, but nobody really lived in it. And it's a very unusual home. The story about our house is really fascinating to me. But the area was kind of dead. It was an old logging slash. We're in an old mining community, and literally the area is dead. And so we spent our last 15 or 16 years really pouring love into this place. And I'm a biologist. I'm a wildlife biologist, and animal behavior and ecology and ecosystems is really important to me. So we have spent all this period of time building this food forest that has ruminants that are helping to feed it, and all kinds of things like that. We have a pond in the front yard. And what's wonderful is we come home and our healing days, if we're really stressed, we'll lay on the lawn. I know people don't always love lawns these days, but we have a small patch of grass where we can run around. Humans were evolved in a woodland environment. So we have trees and we have open spaces so we can see predators coming. We have bears and cougar and so on here. So we have to be able to watch for that. But we'll sit on our lawn and we'll watch the birds, and we'll see the frogs in the pond, and I'll play with the salamanders because I'm still a kid at heart, and watch the animals interact with each other. But when people come to our house, people request to come to our home because we've created this extraordinary tiny little ecosystem. I call it a tiny regenerative farm, but it's a tiny little ecosystem that when people come down the small little hill or little driveway and they enter our property, they have a look of wonderment and awe and wow, and this is beautiful. We just had a gorgeous event for a group of people, and we had a friend who's moving away, and we have this family of people now in the last 2.5 years. I didn't know these people 2.5 years ago, but they've become a family, and they finally have been able to come over to our home, and everyone talked about how relaxing our home was. And I think that's the goal. Our goal in life is to have a place that's safe and comfortable, and I want to like the people that are there, and I want to like looking around, and I want to relax here. And we used to be campers, but we don't do that anymore because our home is more beautiful than most places we've ever been. And that's not exactly true, but it's pretty great. And so we want sanctuary, not just in being able to. I'm looking out the window right now. We want to not just look at beautiful nature outside, but we also want to look at the beautiful interaction between all of the creatures in it, and that includes myself, my husband, my son, the dogs, everything in our life. And when I'm sharing things on social media about the interactions, it's showing the peace and the joy that's happening between them, and having this synergistic relationship where everyone is getting along. And sometimes they're battling, and goats battle, that's what they do, but the dog and the cat and the rabbits and And there's all kinds of creatures that are working around here. And my job was to try and meet all of their needs so that they had all of their fundamental needs met. So they weren't trying in negative ways to get their needs met. And I think if we recognize that this is what we're all looking for, that we're just creatures with unmet needs, and try and find a way to meet those needs in each other and ourselves, then that's how we find peace and sanctuary. And I'm really grateful for the ecosystem and physically and emotionally that we've created here.
Right, and you've created that, but to a point, each of us can create that same sanctuary within it. I mean, you guys have a very special thing, but say somebody's living in a more urban environment, you want to create an area of peace and try to have that area with as much harmony with nature as you can, with some plants, sunshine, all those kinds of things, maybe a pet. These are all really important things that they're tomes of our natural world, of where we came from. And I remember driving to the Silicon Valley a couple of months ago, and it was like the first time I've been to like the San Jose area in years. And I just got this vibe of it being just frantic and on steroids. This is the center of Silicon Valley. And I'm like, there's something innately wrong about this and how people live, and they're stressed out, because I do my best thinking when I'm doing my trail runs. It's just, and so, because you're in nature. So you have to try to bring that in and be conscious of all these modern conveniences and using them. I'm not saying we go back to living outdoors and sleeping on the ground, right? We want to have some of these comforts, but recognizing how to achieve that balance with each of us, and also having the confidence and knowing that we can, and not being caught up in this franticness. Because I see a lot of people who are just caught up in it without even realizing it.
Yeah. And you talked about it earlier, like we're running away from ourselves. So if we can figure out what is our peace, what is it that we want? Like, you can have an extraordinary ecosystem in a studio apartment. You're like, absolutely. And you can find your beautiful places in the world. And for some people it's travel. So you find a way to make it so that you can travel to beautiful places in the world, but you have to actually look at you, and you have to find out what it is that you want, and find a way to get it with grace and ease. And I think that's possible for us all. Yeah.
And finally, I'd like to kind of talk about part of this empowerment once you've found that sanctuary within yourself, and then with your partner, the people you're closest to, and interacting, like you guys had a big wake up call a couple of years ago, right? Because you had to readjust, and out of that, you've actually come out better. So would you like to just share that with you, so I don't have to talk about it, but you talk about it? Because what happened in the last three years has turned out to be a huge blessing, and it's actually empowered you guys even more. Right? Rather than be so can you share what happened?
Well, I know that personally, and I think this happens to a lot of people, we all kind of go through cycles and so on in our relationship, and we had like really moved away from each other, and we had a little catalyst in our relationship, and we took this opportunity to say, listen, like, do we want to just throw away everything that we have been through in our lives together and all the things that we've worked together, or do we want to actually realize that he and I are actually a really great team, and reinvest and just forget all of this stuff? So we took this opportunity that I'm talking specifically about the COVID and Jeff having to get vaccinated, all that, and then how that was a huge. That was complicated. We didn't have to, like, it was so interesting because while we were examining our lives and so on, we had a whole bunch of chaos that was happening. And when I look back, I'm like, all of these little bits of chaos actually brought us to this point. So we were in a position when all of this stuff started to happen that we were able to. You're talking about the pandemic? That's right. Yeah. We were able to say, no, we're not doing this. We know that this is wrong. Like my background and his background, my background in biology and having performed PCR tests and things like that. My whole body, this is where my belly comes back in. My whole body said, no, this is not right. And his background with working with the government and understanding law in another way was really interesting, because we were able to see that the things that were happening were not good. So between us, we were actually able to hold another sanctuary. We have a sanctuary here, but we've created an extraordinary sanctuary in our business. And
that
people
business,
came.
that business was brought out of the fact that Jeff lost his job and his livelihood.
Well, he didn't really lose his job. He had a really traumatic experience working for the government. He had somebody come in and really try and change everything that they did. And actually, in my opinion and his opinion, it actually really destroyed it. And he didn't lose his job at the time, but his soul was destroyed.
And he was essentially forced out.
He was essentially forced out. That's right. And so he was holding on. And then we came across this business, and it was a perfect fit. And so he went from working for the government and working in weapons and things like that to an extension of another part of his life. So he was a fireman, a volunteer fireman and a training officer for years. And the very first person he took first aid with was getting older, and he happened to be renewing his first aid. And this gentleman said, do you know anyone who wants to buy a first aid school? And Jeff came home and he said, hey, and I went, hey, and there was us again, trusting our gut. This was it. And that was 2017. And so we have been building this since then. And because we went through all of those things, we were able to be in a position to say, no, government, we are not doing this. We know that what's happening here is wrong. Other people came to us. We were actually able to help people save their pensions. We were able to help people find a way around some of the extraordinary social pressures, as well as legal pressures, so-called legal pressures that were happening here. We're extremely proud of it. But it was intense. So thank goodness him and I had done an extraordinary amount of work prior to this, because the pressure that came down on Canadians at the time was a lot. And if we had not done all of that work, created that sanctuary, I don't know where we would be. And I don't know where a lot of people around us would be, because we literally we owned the building, we owned the business, and we were able to hold space for people. At one point in time, Jeff literally put our address up on Facebook, and I was like, you can't just do that. And he said, why don't you all come here? And people have been gathering in our office space, our 3-story building in downtown Nanaimo, for 2.5 years, coming together when they have lost everyone, literally everyone. There are some people have died, people have shunned them, they have left, they have been told they're the worst people in the world. And we've all come together and created that sanctuary.
Well, it's not just a sanctuary, but a community.
It's a community. We've created a community.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they've helped us. Like, it's not just, we're so grateful we were able to open the space, and we had the space. And, somebody told me just the other day that all across British Columbia, it's a giant province, all across British Columbia, people have heard of our group. And, over these past few years, there have been all kinds of groups created and have kind of fizzled out, but ours is still here. And it's because of connection. It's because we're actually looking at each other and talking to each other and being honest with each other and talking about our needs and our wants and our desires, and as well as authentically supporting each other and accepting each other no matter what. Our group of people, there's probably been about 500 people through this building who've come for support, who've come to talk. And that group is extraordinarily diverse. Like the big event that we just had, saying goodbye to a friend of ours, he's a banker. We have people who are farmers in the group. We have all different kinds of folks. And it is an extraordinary group of people that I couldn't be more grateful for. But the most important part of that is that could only happen because of all the work that Jeff and I have done. And as well as, of course, all of those people. But if we were not solid in our relationship and our polarity with each other, we couldn't have done this. And I shudder to think where our life would be if it not for that. And for knowing people like you who also understood the biology of what was happening and understanding the legalities and so on, and knowing that having that affirmation that what my gut was telling me this whole time was accurate. And I'm so grateful for all of the people in my life. And most of them are not people that I knew 3 years ago. Some of them have been with me a while, like you. But I have so many more people in my life now who bring so much to me just because they showed up and when we were willing to be authentic and honest with each other.
Yeah, and I think it's great because you're talking about embracing polarity, and it's a message that people just need to be aware of in general, because not just with your partner or spouse or your immediate friends, but there seems to be this subconscious messaging of divisiveness. Everything's polarized now, and it's okay to embrace that and have conversations and say it's good to be different. And
the greatest gift I have from all this time is all the things that my husband and I have learned to heal me are actually a gift to everyone around me. So when I am completely in a soft state and relaxed and feel joy and there's a huge smile on my face, that's contagious. And if I'm really in this joyful, happy state, my husband and I are deeply physically connected, emotionally connected, spiritually connected with each other. When I go for a walk in our city, and our city is suffering right now, it's a small city, but it's a port city. And we are on Vancouver Island, which has a really great climate. So there are people coming from across Canada who are struggling because we have programs and we have the literal climate to support people outside year round. We have so much pain in our environment. So I actually make it a point to fill myself up, do all of my self-care practices, put on the pearls, wear the dress, and go out for a walk and beam radiance at people, because that's a superpower. And if I can walk around and just give a big smile to someone and say, look, I really like your shoes. And then we have a conversation about the world. And then they walk away going, wow, that was really great. And so do I. Then that's the difference that we can make in the world. We in our group and in our city and so on, we're trying to change things on a grander scale. But the reality is change it here and then spread it out.
Yeah, and another tangential point there that I want you to speak to, because again, if it's coming from me, it's toxic masculinity.
Of course.
But a lot of the female superpower is being vulnerable.
Yes.
Is in vulnerability.
Yes.
And women want to be vulnerable, but they want to feel safe in that vulnerability.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the response, but that's the other end of that polarity, that a lot of men now don't recognize that responsibility that they have when a woman makes themselves vulnerable on all levels: physically, emotionally, psychologically, financially, economically. That's a big responsibility that, unfortunately, with what's transpired with culture and the shift, that men are feeling less empowered from a variety of angles. It's not just that their spouses are at their throats, or they feel that way, right? They feel that way. It's because all these powers that be have left people. When you look at how, man's domain, man might just want to go to his job, get paid, take care of his family. But when you see jobs cuts and the cost of living go up, and a guy is struggling to provide. It's and then that creates that internal struggle, but it's a big responsibility for males, and unfortunately, because of we're males and we don't listen and we tend to deny or push things aside, we don't recognize and act on. But also we don't have a lot of what's gone away is the mentorship.
Yeah,
that men mentor other men, like what your husband is doing with Hunter, right?
Yeah.
So there's this yin yang thing where the man wants to feel empowered and take that responsibility, but he's not given the tools. And then the woman wants to be vulnerable as a superpower. It is a superpower.
It is a superpower.
It gets us every time.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. And and I think that the conflict in a relationship is we're unwilling to be vulnerable with our partners. So if we're just tough and I'm getting the jar off the counter, the shelf myself.
It's that chronic fight or fight physiology.
Yeah, and worthiness as well, right? And if we just take the moment, if I just take the moment to just be in grace and ask for help, and now I get to ask my son, and he gets to support me, and he's taller than my husband, so I get to really also guide him by showing him where his power is, that he can care for and protect a woman or women or younger people or animals or what have you, and and when I have a big smile on my face, like, thank you for helping me, even though I'm capable of doing it myself, it's my goal is to set him up for success and to know what to look for in his partners, so that when he is old enough, if he chooses, if he wants to have a family, that he chooses the role of being the provider, the protector, the supporter of this woman who will then create more humans. Like, women make all the people, and we need men to protect us while we do that. And so if I can show him that this is the beautiful role, and so that all the time I took with him, homeschooling and unschooling and being home with him and showing him that tuning into your kids and creating the next generation of people is your job. And like, my job is not just to create a person and then have the government raise it. My job is to create someone else's husband, or somebody who's going to take care of somebody else's children or anything like that. That's my job, is to guide this human into being the best human he can be. And I think many of us have this sad belief that we're supposed to pop out some kids and then hand them over to somebody who doesn't love them to raise them. And I think that is the biggest bit of misinformation that we've all been fed. And the joy that I have and the gratitude I feel for my husband for wanting me to be at home with our kid, the agreement that we made that we would be the person who was with our child, that our child would only be with someone who loved them. And we're grateful we were able to do that. I know that's not possible for all people, but thank goodness. And the proof is in the pudding. This kid, I can't say enough about this kid. And you're coaching him now. So I have more men in his life who are helping to guide him and make this incredible human. And that's our legacy, is to make the next generation of people and to make them healthy and strong and to be creative, because when you are relaxed and healthy and your needs are met, that's where creativity comes from. That's where all of the most extraordinary inventions come from, and that's how we save the world. I know that sounds grandiose, but it's, and not that the world needs saving, but that's
it
where
needs saving, Tina, because it needs saving. It needs creativity. It needs the ability to step back and not be right and look at and get a conversation going, because it's not happening now. And you know, the last 3 years haven't made that crystal clear. It's been going on for a long time, but
yes, sir.
The events of the last 3 years have made it pretty crystal clear. The veil's been pulled back, and a lot of people aren't willing to see that. And it's just, and it goes right back to, okay, we're talking about this on a macro level with, you know, politics, government, medicine, science, but then it goes right back to, are we willing to pull that veil back on ourselves first?
Yes. Yeah.
And deal with that, and then from that, we can really create that creativity and move forward. And fortunately, it's kind of funny you mentioned this, because the people who have come into my life in the last several years, and especially now in the last 3 or 4 years, I'm thinking when you're talking about this resonates with me, because I was hearing it yesterday from Dr. Debris, who's one of B.F. Skinner's acolytes from the behavioral psychology of the 60s and 70s. You know, he's in his Dr. Debris in his 80s now, and he was talking exactly about what you're talking about. Or I was thinking about John Dionisiou, my marketing guy and business development guy, who's been crucial to making all this happen. Because I'm just this guy who's I'm good at what I do, but I'm kind of like this absent-minded professor in terms of execution and getting it out there. And so he's been making it happen. But think when you're talking about you and your sanctuary and your relationship with Jeff, I mean, he and his wife have the same thing. Like I hear them in the background when we're on a meeting, like complimenting each other and how they interact, and they've created that for themselves, and they've created a sanctuary for themselves because they're both from Australia. They both got out of the church they were in because it became a little bit to suffocating.
Mm-hmm.
So they had to leave the church, and it caused a lot of shunning, right? But
Mm-hmm.
he and his wife, they were both from Australia, and she's of Irish descent. His parents were from Cyprus, and so they had dual citizenship, and they just happened to be in Cyprus, living there at the time all this stuff happened. And it couldn't have been more fortunate. They created their sanctuary there to a point, because Australia is no different from Canada in terms of the draconian measures that were taken.
Yeah,
and
it's pretty bad.
And he didn't buy it either, because he bought into my Kool-Aid. So he's that way anyway. So as you're talking about this, all this stuff's coming up, that there are people out there who are doing it, and that the reason we had this conversation is so other people again, here's another one. Dr. Kathy, she and her partner left New Jersey because of what was going on there, and moved to Florida and created their sanctuary. So
smart.
People are doing this, and I want people to know that they need to recognize that they have that ability, and you're the perfect. That's why I wanted to have this conversation, and why this topic, because you're sort of like the poster child for this.
Sanctuary in the middle of hell. Is that what you mean?
Well, no, we can, this is life. I mean, even from an evolutionary perspective, hunting, gathering, survival. I mean, sure, I call it feasting and fasting, because game was plentiful in our tribal hunter-gatherer lives, but there was a lot of work to be done, and there were some dangers. They weren't the same dangers and chronic stressors we had today, but we all figured out how to create our sanctuary, and the whole journey of humanity is we've brought ourselves to the sanctuaries we have today, and the problem is we've forgotten that, and it took a lot of hard work, both within ourselves and within our communities. It took a lot of ingenuity, and we've forgotten that. We've gotten, unfortunately, we've gotten kind of dumber as a consequence. As a society.
That might be by design. Yeah, I think that might be by design.
Yeah. I mean, have you ever seen the movie Idiocracy?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. With all this said, though, I feel like all species don't evolve without pressure. And like, if everything's really easy, then we just kind of stay in this place. And, that phrase, hard times create strong men. And, that wonderful phrase that
weak men.
Yeah, exactly. And that, like, as much as this experience over the past few years has been painful in many ways, it's also been the most extraordinarily transformative period of our lives. And we have gained so much. Even though we've lost, we've gained so much. And I'm grateful for the things that we've learned, and the ability to find love and joy and wonderment in ourselves, and to know that we're sovereign beings, like you mentioned, and that we can take care of ourselves, and we don't have to depend on daddy government to take care of us. And I'm just about to have a meeting where we're going to brainstorm what we can do about some of the people, how we can support people. Like, we have a really very serious unhoused problem, and in California, I'm sure you're experiencing some of the similarities.
Oh, you have no idea.
Oh, I have an idea.
You have no idea. The climate here is even better than in Nanaimo, so you can only imagine and it's such a disconnect. But we won't get into that. But I think the point here is you can take lemons and make lemonade.
That's right.
And that's I certainly can say that. We were on our way with FESPA and OFM before the pandemic started. I mean, we had the best months we have, and things were going good, and then boom.
Yeah.
And so, it's been rough. I've had to go into a lot of debt to keep going, but it's given me a greater sense of purpose and drive, and we've retooled and restructured. And with what's happened and what's transpired, right, it's become pretty obvious that sovereignty extends to your health, and we need modern medicine, but we need to keep ourselves arm's length. And I remember having a conversation with my friend Bruce about this whole thing in the beginning about metabolic health, because it was clear who was having bad outcomes. And he said, well, we don't have time for that. We have to do something. And now that is a moot point, because nobody in the powers that be have been mentioning metabolic health as a policy.
Mm-hmm.
It's always been these sort of policies that tend to monetize greatly for a few. Mm-hmm. And so, and he's on board with what I do. He's one of my biggest fans, but it's like this, and now he's supporting that, but it's like, this is not, people have to realize what they're not hearing. And that is that they're not hearing that they need to, and they can take control of themselves, whether it's their wounding, their health, their finances. You need to shut out all that messaging that's telling you got to be this, you got to be that, and find out what you got to do for you. And then find the people, like you say, the mentors out there, and they're out there who can provide you with the tools and the guidance to create that sovereign thing. I mean, you've done it. Like I said, my friend John and his wife have done it in Cyprus. I mean, they're like, it was a blessing that they were there, because they had a house in Brisbane, Australia, etc. And they just happened to be there. Now they have a house in Cyprus, and they finally decided this is where we're going to be. But they created their luck. Yes, they were lucky they were in Cyprus when this hit, but they created their luck. And would you have known through all the tumultuous years you've gone through that you'd arrived here? Somebody said this is what it was going to be. It's like, really?
I know. And I love looking back at that and going, all of those things prepared us for this. That's
right. Yeah. And it's like I say, we try, in today's world, we try to be risk-free, and we try to plan things out. And this is a lot of what AI is all about. But yet nature has what I call this elegant chaos. And out of that chaos comes an order. And you just kind of got to go with that flow. You don't have to be naive or anything. You have to control, but the control lies right with us.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So anything you'd like to finish up with, because this is about you, and I've talked a lot here at the end to kind of summarize this. But any words for the audience out there from your journey? And sanctuary.
I don't know. I definitely think that if I can say one thing, it is to figure out what it is that you need, and what it is that you want, and what's a want and what's a need. And to be honest with yourself, because we might have this belief that we want something, and it sounds great, and all that programming and conditioning will tell you that that's what you want, but really, like, following your gut, following your beautiful belly, and following where it leads and what it's telling you, and really tuning into yourself is and listening to people, and being open, and being willing to change your mind, I think is probably the most important words that I can say to anyone. And I can remind myself, because sometimes I forget that that I can change my mind, and I can have gratitude for the things around me, and even the painful things, because like we said, they're guiding us and sending us on a path that we might not know is going to be extraordinary in the future. So
yeah, I would say that's getting to be quiet with yourself, to be able to tune out all that noise. And that's really hard to do, as you say, in today's world. They don't, all these entities, whatever they are, don't want that. They want to keep pinging that cortisol with that messaging.
Well, and it's the greatest way to sell things. If you are afraid and don't even know yourself, you're grasping for anything in order to feel whole. And if you can just
shopping therapy.
And you know what? Like, we do need people to build things and make things and be creative and come up with extraordinary things. Look at the world we live in. Like, look at all the things that have been created. But not all of them are a benefit to us. Some of them are pleasurable. Some of them are a benefit. And a lot of it is just filler.
And convenience.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Thanks very Peter. Much, Tina. Yeah, this was great.
Yeah. It's always great talking to you.
Yeah. I wish we could have recorded a lot of the stuff we've talked about, but you know, who knows? It's all good.
Who knows? We have to do it again.
Yeah, this podcast is a little sanctuary in itself, eh?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So keep on doing what you're doing, and we'll have another conversation down the road, because I recorded a podcast with Rocco Bellick on being happy.
So
And
good.
that got well received, and I want to do more of these, because it fundamentally has to do with optimizing your fat metabolism so you can optimize your health and performance, because we need to turn down that cortisol response, and it's just such an endemic part of today's modern world. And even when we're actually trying to turn it down, we're thinking our cortisol. Yeah, so it's a crazy thing. And you just, it just dawned on me on my run on Sunday, the theme of this first conversation with you, Tina. So looking forward to many more.
Sounds wonderful. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you.